I'm Ivy, 34 years old, and I was standing in my own living room when my husband introduced another woman as his wife to his business partners. The champagne glass trembled in my hand as Mark wrapped his arm around Sophia, his 23-year-old secretary, while calling me the help. 15 years of marriage, 3 beautiful children, and everything I sacrificed for our life together dismissed in a single sentence. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Please hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever felt invisible in your own life. The story of how I met Mark feels like it belonged to a different person now. We were both at Yale, young and ambitious, with our whole lives mapped out in front of us. I was pre-med, top of my class, with dreams of becoming a pediatric surgeon. Mark was in the business school, charming and confident, with this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when he talked to you. Our first date was at this little coffee shop near campus. He showed up with a single sunflower because he said roses were too predictable for someone as unique as me. We talked for 6 hours that day about everything from our favorite books to our 5-year plans. His dream was to build a company that would change the automotive industry. Mine was to open a practice that would provide free surgeries for children whose families couldn't afford medical care. Everything changed when I got pregnant during my senior year. The pregnancy test turned positive just 2 weeks before my MCAT exam. Mark had just been accepted to Harvard Business School for his MBA, and we had this long conversation about our futures sitting on the floor of my tiny dorm room. He held my hands and promised we were a team, that we would figure it out together. The decision to leave medical school felt temporary at the time. Just a pause, not an ending. Mark needed to focus on his MBA without worrying about money, and I could work as a nurse with my undergraduate degree. We got married at City Hall 3 months before Emma was born, with just his brother and my sister as witnesses. I wore a white sundress from Target and thought I had never been happier. Those early years were harder than I ever imagined. I worked double shifts at the hospital while Mark attended classes. I would come home at 7 in the morning after a night shift, and Mark would hand me Emma as he rushed out the door. I'd spend the day with our baby, catching naps when she slept, then hand her to Mark when he got home so I could go back for another shift. Tyler came along 2 years later, just as Mark was graduating. He had this incredible job offer from a consulting firm, but it meant moving to Connecticut and traveling 4 days a week. I found work at a local hospital, juggling night shifts with daycare schedules. When Lucas arrived 4 years after that, I cut back to part-time, then eventually stopped working altogether because the cost of childcare for 3 kids was more than I was making. But we were building something together, or so I thought. Mark's career took off like a rocket. He left consulting to join an automotive startup, worked his way up to senior management, then got recruited by one of the major manufacturers. Each promotion meant longer hours, more travel, but also more money. We bought the colonial house in Greenwich I had fallen in love with during a Sunday drive. 4 bedrooms, a kitchen with marble countertops, and a backyard big enough for the kids to play soccer. 6 months ago, everything started to change, though I didn't see it at the time. Mark got promoted to Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, overseeing the company's expansion into Asian markets. With the promotion came a new office, a new company car, and a new secretary. Sophia Chen, fresh out of community college with an associate degree in business administration. I remember the first time he mentioned her. We were having dinner, just the 2 of us, after the kids were in bed, and he said his new assistant was really stepping up to help with the Japanese merger preparations. She was eager to learn, stayed late without complaining, and had even started taking Japanese lessons to better support the team. I actually felt grateful that he had someone competent helping him during such a stressful time. The changes were subtle at first. Mark joined a gym, something he hadn't done since college. He said the job was too stressful, and he needed an outlet. New clothes started appearing in his closet, designer suits, instead of his usual off-the-rack purchases. He switched from his drugstore cologne to something expensive that came in a heavy glass bottle. When I commented on it, he said image mattered more at the VP level, that he needed to look the part. The late nights increased, but there was always an explanation. The Tokyo office was calling. The merger documents needed review. The legal team had questions. He would come home after midnight shower immediately and collapse into bed. On weekends, he was distracted, constantly checking his phone, stepping out to take calls that couldn't wait until Monday. 2 weeks before the dinner party that changed everything, Mark told me about the Japanese investors coming to town. Mr. Yamamoto and Mr. Suzuki were flying in from Tokyo with their wives, and this dinner could make or break the merger. He needed everything to be perfect. The house had to be immaculate, the food exceptional, the atmosphere sophisticated. This was our chance, he said, to secure our family's future. I threw myself into preparations with the same intensity I once applied to studying for medical school exams. I researched Japanese business etiquette, learned about their corporate culture, even found a specialty store in the city that imported ingredients from Japan. I planned a fusion menu that would show respect for their cuisine while highlighting American hospitality. Miso glazed salmon Wagyu beef sliders, a delicate yuzu tart for dessert. Mark seemed appreciative, even affectionate in those days leading up to the dinner. He brought me coffee in bed, something he hadn't done in years. He complimented the dress I picked out for the evening, a navy blue cocktail dress that he had bought me for our 10th anniversary. He even suggested we send the kids to his parents for the weekend, saying they deserved a special treat with their grandparents, and we could focus entirely on hosting. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I ignored. The way he would smile at his phone when a text came through, the new passwords on his laptop and tablet, the credit card statements that went paperless without discussion, the weekend conference in Boston that he attended alone because spouses weren't invited. Every sign was there, but I was too busy being the perfect wife to notice my husband was already building a life without me. The morning of the dinner party, I woke up at 5:30 to start preparations. The salmon needed to marinate for exactly 6 hours. The beef had to be brought to room temperature slowly, and I wanted to make the yuzu tart shells from scratch. Mark was already awake, sitting at the kitchen counter with his laptop open, wearing the Harvard Business School t-shirt he only pulled out when he was nervous. He looked up when I entered and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something else there, something I couldn't quite identify. Guilt, maybe, or anticipation. He closed his laptop quickly and stood up to pour me coffee from the pot he had already made. As he handed me the mug, his fingers brushed mine, and he held them there for a moment longer than necessary. The morning passed in a blur of chopping, stirring, and checking lists. I had spreadsheets for everything, timing charts for when each dish needed to go in the oven, a schedule for when to set the table and arrange the flowers. Emma called around noon from her grandmother's house, excited about going to the zoo. Tyler wanted to tell me about the model airplane he was building with Grandpa. Lucas just wanted to know if we could get ice cream when he came home. I promised him we would not, knowing it would be weeks before I saw my children again in our own house. At 3 o'clock, I was arranging the orchids I had special ordered when the doorbell rang. Mark was in the shower, so I wiped my hands on my apron and went to answer it. Sophia stood on our doorstep 3 hours before the guests were due to arrive, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than I had spent on groceries in the past month. She smiled at me, perfect white teeth that looked recently bleached, and held up a bottle of wine. Chateau Margaux, a vintage that I knew cost at least $800, because Mark had pointed it out at a wine shop once, saying maybe when he made CEO, we could splurge on a bottle. She walked in without waiting for an invitation, her designer heels clicking on our hardwood floors with a confidence that made my stomach tighten. Mark came downstairs, then his hair still damp from the shower, wearing the new Tom Ford suit that had appeared in his closet last month. His face lit up when he saw Sophia in a way that used to be reserved for me. He took the wine from her hands, examining the label with appreciation, then looked at me still standing by the door in my flour-dusted apron and said, Sophia had offered to help with the final preparations since this dinner was so important. What struck me most was how comfortable she seemed in my house. She knew where we kept the wine glasses without asking. She found the corkscrew in the correct drawer on her first try. When she went to use the bathroom, she turned left down the hallway without hesitation. These were small things, but they added up to a picture I wasn't ready to see. I returned to the kitchen while Mark and Sophia discussed the evening's agenda in the living room. Through the doorway, I could see them standing close together, her hand occasionally touching his arm as she spoke him, leaning in to catch every word. She laughed at something he said, throwing her head back in a gesture that seemed rehearsed, and he watched her with an expression I recognized from 20 years ago when he used to look at me that way. The investors arrived at exactly 6:30 punctual to the minute, as Mark had predicted. Mr. Yamamoto was in his 60s, distinguished with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His wife was elegant in a simple black dress and pearls, carrying herself with a quiet dignity that made Sophia's flashy red dress look even more out of place. Mr. Suzuki was younger, perhaps 45, with an easy smile and enthusiastic handshake. His wife was warm and friendly, complimenting our home in accented but perfect English. What happened next still feels like an out-of-body experience when I remember it. Mark guided the guests into the living room, where Sophia was already positioned by the bar cart, ready to serve drinks. I started to follow, eager to meet these people who were so important to our future, but Mark stopped me with a hand on my arm. His words were quiet but firm. Just focus on the food, Ivy. We need everything to be perfect. So I stayed in the kitchen, listening to the sound of laughter and conversation drifting in from the other room. Through the serving window, I could see Sophia playing hostess, offering drinks and appetizers I had prepared, while Mark told stories about his recent trip to Tokyo. She stood beside him like she belonged there, and nobody questioned it. When it was time to serve the first course, I arranged the plates carefully on a tray and carried them out to the dining room. The conversation stopped as I entered, and Mrs. Yamamoto smiled at me warmly. I smiled back, about to introduce myself properly, when Mark's voice cut through the moment. He was explaining to Mr. Suzuki about the preparation of the dish, how his wife had researched authentic Japanese techniques. For a brief moment, I felt a spark of pride that he was acknowledging my efforts. Then he gestured to Sophia. The words that came out of my husband's mouth in that moment rearranged my entire understanding of my life. "This is my wife, Sophia," he said, his arms sliding around her waist with practiced ease. "She's been instrumental in preparing for our merger, bringing fresh perspectives and innovative ideas to the table. Her understanding of Asian business culture has been invaluable." The room seemed to tilt. I stood there holding a serving dish of the miso-glazed salmon I had woken up at 5:30 to prepare, watching my husband of 15 years introduce his secretary as his wife to business partners who could change our financial future. The careful lies rolled off his tongue so smoothly, I wondered how many times he had rehearsed them. Mr. Yamamoto's eyes moved from Sophia to me, confusion flickering across his features. He gestured politely in my direction and asked Mark who I was, this woman serving food in what was clearly my own home. I watched Mark's face, waiting for him to correct himself, to laugh at the ridiculous mistake, to explain that obviously I was his wife, and Sophia was just an overeager assistant. Instead, he glanced at me with casual dismissal and said the words that shattered 15 years of marriage into pieces. "That's just Ivy. She helps with the house. She's been with us for years, very reliable. The kids adore her." The words hung in the air like poison. Mrs. Yamamoto's eyes widened slightly, her gaze moving to the wall behind Mark where our wedding photo hung in a silver frame. Then to the mantel, where a professional family portrait from last Christmas showed Mark and me with our 3 children, all wearing matching white shirts and jeans, the perfect American family. Sophia's performance was flawless. She touched Mark's hand gently, smiled at the investors, and began talking about their future plans together. How they were looking forward to traveling to Tokyo next month for the merger finalization. How they had been discussing which schools would be best when they started their family. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had been promised these things, and Mark nodded along, adding details about the house they were considering in Westchester. My children were never mentioned. Emma, who had Mark's eyes, and my stubborn streak. Tyler, who wanted to be just like his father, wearing tiny suits to school picture day. Lucas, our surprise baby, who still crawled into our bed during thunderstorms. They had been erased from existence, sent away to their grandparents, so they wouldn't complicate this elaborate fiction, Mr. Suzuki was asking Sophia about her background, and she was weaving a story about graduating from Wharton, about her family's business connections in Shanghai, about how she and Mark had met at a conference in San Francisco. All lies, but delivered with such conviction that if I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed them myself. The serving dish grew heavy in my hands. My mind raced through the options available to me. I could drop it, create a scene, scream the truth at these strangers in my dining room. I could walk out, leave them to their charade, pack my things, and disappear. I could play along, serve the meal in silence, and deal with Mark after the guests left. But as I stood there, something else occurred to me. These were successful businessmen, men who had built careers on reading people and situations. They had already noticed the wedding photos, the family portraits, the children's artwork stuck to the refrigerator that was visible through the kitchen doorway. They knew something was wrong, even if they were too polite to say it. Mrs. Yamamoto caught my eye, and in her gaze, I saw something that looked like understanding, maybe even sympathy. She had noticed my wedding ring, the same design as the one still on Mark's finger, though he had tried to hide it by turning the band around. She had seen the Mother's Day card on the sideboard, handmade by a child addressed to Mommy with love from Emma, Tyler, and Lucas. I set the serving dish down carefully on the table, the soft clink of porcelain against wood, the only sound in the room. Then I reached behind my back and untied my apron, the one Emma had given me last Christmas that said, "World's Best Mom" in glittery letters. I folded it deliberately, placed it on the sideboard next to the Mother's Day card, and turned back to face the table. Mark's face had gone pale. He knew me well enough to recognize the calm that came before I made a decision. It was the same expression I had worn when I told him I was leaving medical school, when I agreed to move to Connecticut, when I said yes to every sacrifice that had brought us to this moment. But this time, the decision I was about to make was for me. I walked to the head of the table with the same composure I used to display during trauma rotations, when everything was chaos, but my hands remained steady. My voice came out clear and professional, the kind of tone I had perfected during nursing school presentations. I apologize for the confusion, everyone. Allow me to properly introduce myself. I am Dr. Ivy Harrison Blake, though I suppose the doctor title is premature since I never finished medical school. Mark started to stand, his mouth opening to interrupt, but I held up my hand and continued. I am Mark's legal wife of 15 years, the mother of his 3 children, and the person who has spent the last 2 weeks preparing this meal for you. I gestured to the wall of photographs behind them. Those are our wedding photos from 2009, and that's our family portrait from last Christmas. Our children, Emma, Tyler, and Lucas, are currently at their grandparents' house for the weekend. Sophia's perfectly composed face began to crack, her hand pulling away from Mark's arm. But I wasn't finished. Turning to Mrs. Yamamoto, I switched to Japanese, the language I had studied for 3 years during my pre-med program when I thought I might do a residency in Tokyo. Her eyes widened in surprise as I apologized for the deception she had been forced to witness in our home, expressed my deep embarrassment that our family matters had intruded on their business dinner. Mr. Yamamoto leaned forward, his expression shifting from confusion to interest. "You speak Japanese," he said in English, a statement more than a question. I nodded and explained in his language that I had dreamed of studying at Tokyo Medical and Dental University before life took me in a different direction. His wife asked also in Japanese if the young woman in red was indeed Mark's secretary, not his wife. "Yes," I replied, maintaining my calm tone. "Miss Sophia Chen has been employed by the company for approximately 6 months as an administrative assistant. She graduated from Westchester Community College last spring with an associate degree. According to the information my private investigator gathered, she is 23 years old and lives in an apartment in White Plains that my husband has been paying for through a shell company." The room erupted. Mark was on his feet, his face red, shouting about privacy and betrayal. Sophia was stammering that I didn't understand, that their connection was real, that Mark was planning to leave me anyway. The investors sat in stunned silence, Mr. Suzuki actually pulling out his phone to record what was happening, though his wife quickly made him put it away. I reached into the drawer of the sideboard where I had placed a folder earlier that day, hidden beneath table linens. Inside were copies of documents I had been collecting for 3 weeks, ever since I had found a receipt for lingerie in Mark's jacket pocket, lingerie I had never received. The private investigator had been thorough documenting meetings at hotels, dinners at restaurants we could never afford on Mark's legitimate salary, shopping trips to jewelry stores. But more importantly, the folder contained financial records I had accessed using my power of attorney, a document Mark had signed years ago when he traveled constantly for work. Records showing that Mark had been embezzling from his company, disguising personal expenses as business costs, billing dinners with Sophia as client meetings, charging her apartment to the company as a temporary corporate housing for visiting executives. I handed the folder to Mr. Yamamoto. "These are copies," I said calmly. "The originals have already been provided to the board of directors at Mark's company, as well as to the forensic accounting firm they hired last week when they noticed discrepancies in the merger documentation." Mark lunged for the folder, but Mr. Yamamoto pulled it out of reach, his eyes scanning the documents with growing alarm. He said something rapid in Japanese to his colleague, then looked at Mark with an expression of complete disgust. "You have been lying to us about everything," he said. "The financial projections, the company's stability, even your marriage. This merger is finished. What happened next still makes me smile when I remember it, Mrs." Yamamoto stood up, walked around the table, and took my hands in hers. She spoke in perfect English, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You have great strength and dignity. In our culture, we have a saying, Nanakorabi ya oki, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. You are standing up now, and we honor your courage." Mr. Suzuki was already on the phone with someone in Tokyo, speaking rapidly about canceling flights and calling emergency board meetings. His wife was gathering their things, shooting disapproving looks at Mark and Sophia, who stood frozen like actors who had forgotten their lines. The elaborate fantasy they had constructed was crumbling, and with it Mark's career. As the investors prepared to leave, I had one more card to play. I pulled out my phone and showed Mr. Yamamoto an email I had received that morning. It was from Yale Medical School, a response to my application to return and complete my degree. After 15 years, they were willing to accept me back, crediting my previous coursework and my years of nursing experience. Classes would start in the fall. Mrs. Yamamoto squeezed my hands again before they left, whispering that she hoped to hear of my success in the future. Mr. Yamamoto left his business card suggesting that when I completed my medical degree, their company's foundation might be interested in funding the free clinic for children I had once dreamed of opening. It was a moment of unexpected kindness in the midst of chaos. After the investor's car disappeared down our driveway, Mark turned on me with a fury I had never seen before. 15 years of marriage, and I had never seen this version of him, the one who could scream accusations and blame everyone but himself. He called me vindictive, destructive, jealous. He said I had ruined his life out of spite, that I couldn't stand to see him happy. Sophia tried to calm him down, her hand on his arm, but he shook her off violently. She stepped back, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Perhaps she was beginning to understand that the charming executive who had promised her everything was capable of destroying anyone who got in his way, including her. I didn't engage with his rage. Instead, I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the suitcases I had packed that morning while he was in the shower. My clothes, my jewelry, the photo albums that contained memories of who we used to be. I had already moved everything that mattered to me, including copies of all our financial records and the children's important documents. Mark's rage turned to panic when he saw the suitcases. He blocked the doorway, switching from anger to desperation in seconds. "We could work this out," he said. "Couples therapy. A fresh start." He would end things with Sophia immediately. It had been a mistake, a midlife crisis, temporary insanity brought on by work stress. The words poured out of him, every cliché excuse wrapped in false promises. Behind him, Sophia was quietly gathering her purse, trying to slip out unnoticed. But Mark saw her and called out, telling her to wait, that they needed to talk, that this didn't change anything between them. The look of confusion on her face would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. She actually believed she was special, that their relationship was different, that she wasn't just another accessory to Mark's ego. I pulled out one last document from my purse, a separation agreement my lawyer had drawn up that morning. It outlined the terms clearly. I would take my inheritance from my grandmother, including the 51% ownership of our house that had been purchased primarily with that money. Mark could buy me out at market value, or we would sell it. I would maintain primary custody of the children with supervised visitation for Mark, given his recent behavior. And most importantly, I would be withdrawing my initial investment from his company, the $30,000 of my nursing savings that had helped him start his business 10 years ago, plus interest. The color drained from his face as he read. Without my grandmother's house as collateral, he couldn't secure the loans he needed. Without my initial investment paperwork, his company ownership structure would have to be reorganized. And with the embezzlement scandal about to break, he wouldn't be able to get another executive position anywhere. In trying to erase me from his life, he had failed to realize how much of that life was built on foundations I had provided. I left that night with my dignity intact, and my future finally my own again. My sister Jennifer was waiting in her car at the end of our driveway, engine running, ready to take me to her house where my children were actually staying. I had lied about them being with Mark's parents, knowing I needed them somewhere safe while I executed my plan. As we drove away, I saw Sophia's car still parked outside my former home, and I wondered if she was beginning to understand that she had won a prize that was worth nothing. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of legal procedures and emotional revelations. Mark's company launched an internal investigation Monday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, he had been suspended pending a full audit. The forensic accountants found more than even I had discovered. He had been padding expense reports for 2 years, long before Sophia arrived. She was just the latest in a pattern of deception that had probably started when he realized his Harvard MBA didn't automatically guarantee the success he felt entitled to. Telling the children was the hardest part. Emma, my wise 14-year-old, wasn't entirely surprised. She had noticed things I had missed or ignored. Dad's new cologne, the way he suddenly cared about his appearance, the weekend business trips that didn't match his company's travel calendar she had seen online. She hugged me tight and said she was proud of me for standing up for myself, words no mother should have to hear from her teenage daughter, but which meant everything in that moment. Tyler at 12 was angry. Not at me, but at Mark for embarrassing our family, for lying, for choosing someone else over us. He wanted to know if this meant we wouldn't be a family anymore. I told him we would always be a family, just a different shape than before. He nodded solemnly and asked if he could stay with me instead of having to visit his father. The custody lawyer said his age made his preference relevant, which was a small relief. Lucas, my baby at 8, just wanted to know if we were still going to get the ice cream I had promised. His innocence broke my heart and healed it at the same time. He didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home, but he accepted it with the resilience children possess when they feel secure in at least one parent's love. We got ice cream that night, and every night that week, rules be damned. The legal proceedings moved faster than expected. Mark's lawyer, presumably paid for with money he no longer had access to, advised him to accept my terms rather than fight a battle he couldn't win. The embezzlement scandal had made him radioactive in professional circles. His company fired him officially after a week, and the board voted to pursue criminal charges to recover the stolen funds. Sophia was terminated the same day for violating the company's ethics policy. The house sold quickly, even in a tough market. A young family fell in love with it the same way I once had, seeing potential in its rooms for Christmas mornings and birthday parties. I used my portion of the sale to buy a modest 3-bedroom townhouse near Yale, close enough to campus for my upcoming classes, but still in a good school district for the kids. It had a small garden where I could grow tomatoes and a breakfast nook where we could do homework together. The financial settlement was more favorable than I had expected. My lawyer discovered that Mark had hidden assets in cryptocurrency and offshore accounts, thinking he was being clever. But financial forensics had come a long way since he had read about hiding money in some business book. Everything was recovered, and the judge was not amused by his attempts at deception. I received 70% of our joint assets, full child support and alimony, for the duration of my medical school education. Medical school at 34 with 3 children was daunting, but Yale was surprisingly supportive. They assigned me a counselor who specialized in non-traditional students, connected me with other parents in the program, and helped me arrange my schedule to accommodate school pickup times. My study group included a 42-year-old former military medic and a 38-year-old former pharmacist, proof that it was never too late to pursue your dreams. The first day of classes, I dropped the kids at school and drove to campus with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Walking into that lecture hall felt like coming home after a long journey. The professor, Dr. Martinez, recognized my name from 15 years ago and welcomed me back with genuine warmth. As I opened my notebook and prepared to learn, I realized that everything that had happened had led me to exactly where I was supposed to be. 6 months into the divorce proceedings, I heard through mutual friends that Mark had moved back with his parents in New Jersey. Sophia had left him within weeks of the scandal breaking, moving on to another executive at a different company. She had probably learned from her mistakes with Mark choosing someone actually single this time. He had tried to find work, but word travels fast in corporate circles, and nobody wanted to hire someone who had stolen from his company and lied to international investors. I didn't take pleasure in his downfall. If anything, I felt a strange sort of pity for him. He had possessed everything most people dream of: a loving family, a beautiful home, a successful career, and had thrown it all away for a fantasy that was never going to last. The Mark I had fallen in love with at Yale wouldn't recognize the man he had become, and maybe that was the real tragedy. The kids adjusted better than I had expected. Emma threw herself into her studies, determined to get into Yale like her mother. She joined the debate team and won her first tournament, arguing about women's rights in the workplace using her own family's experience as motivation, though not as content. Tyler found solace in sports and therapy, working through his anger in healthy ways. Lucas discovered a love for science, conducting experiments in our kitchen that sometimes required professional cleaning services. They saw their father once a month supervised visits at a neutral location. Mark tried to explain himself to them to justify his actions, but children have a way of seeing through adult nonsense. Emma told him directly that he had chosen someone else over their family, and that was a fact no excuse could change. Tyler refused to speak to him for the first 3 visits, communicating only through written notes. Lucas just wanted to know why Daddy had lied, a question Mark couldn't answer honestly. A year into medical school, I met Daniel at the teaching hospital where we both did rotations. He was a widowed pediatric surgeon with twin daughters the same age as Lucas. We bonded over late-night study sessions and single-parent struggles. He didn't try to rush anything, understanding that trust would take time to rebuild. Our first date was actually a play date for our kids at a science museum, all 5 children running around while we drank coffee and talked about everything except romance. Daniel knew my story. Everyone at the hospital did, thanks to the gossip mill, but he never treated me like damaged goods. He saw me as a survivor, someone who had faced the worst and come out stronger. When he finally kissed me after 6 months of friendship and careful courtship, it felt like a new beginning rather than a replacement for what I had lost. The contrast with Mark was striking. Daniel included the children in our relationship from the beginning, understanding that we were a package deal. He helped Tyler with his math homework, attended Emma's debate tournaments, and taught Lucas how to properly use a microscope. He didn't try to replace their father, just offered them stable male presence they could rely on. 3 years have passed since that dinner party that changed everything. Today I'm standing in my cap and gown, waiting to walk across the stage at Yale Medical School's graduation ceremony. Emma is in the audience, home from her freshman year at Yale, where she's pre-law, determined to fight for women who find themselves in situations like ours. Tyler is recording everything on his phone, now 15, and considering following his mother into medicine. Lucas, 11, and brilliant, made a sign that says, "My mom is a doctor," in glittery letters that remind me of that apron I left behind in another life. Daniel is here with his daughters, our blended family taking up an entire row. My parents flew in from California. My mother crying happy tears. She tried to hide behind her program. Jennifer, my sister who picked me up that night 3 years ago, sits next to them with her husband and kids, the support system that had held me up when I couldn't stand on my own. As they call my name, Dr. Ivy Harrison, I think about the path that brought me here. The MD after my name isn't just a degree, it's proof that sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually redirections toward who we were always meant to become. I had to lose everything I thought I wanted to find everything I actually needed. After the ceremony, as we're taking pictures, I see a familiar figure across the courtyard. Mark is standing by the entrance, looking older, grayer, diminished. He's wearing an ill-fitting suit, nothing like the designer clothes he once prized. Our eyes meet for a moment, and I see him start to walk toward us. Emma notices him too and instinctively steps closer to me, protective and wary. He stops a few feet away, his hands in his pockets like a schoolboy. "Congratulations," he says quietly. "You always wanted this." I could be angry that he's here, that he's inserting himself into my moment, but I realize I feel nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even pity anymore. He's just someone I used to know, a chapter in a story that has moved far beyond him. "Thank you," I reply simply. The children look at him with varying degrees of discomfort. Lucas waves slightly. Tyler nods, and Emma just stares. He seems to want to say more, maybe apologize, maybe explain, but Daniel steps forward and extends his hand. Mark shakes it, confusion on his face. "I'm Daniel," he says warmly but firmly. "Congratulations on your children's achievements. They're remarkable young people. The subtle emphasis on your children isn't lost on anyone." Mark mumbles something about needing to go and walks away. Later, Emma tells me she saw him get into an old Honda Civic with a Domino's delivery sign on top. The executive who once drove a Mercedes now delivers pizzas to pay his restitution to the company he stole from. It's a fall from grace that would be Shakespearean if it wasn't so pathetic. That evening at my graduation party, surrounded by friends and family and colleagues who had become both, I realized that betrayal really can be a gift. Mark's cruelty had freed me from a life where I was slowly disappearing, where my dreams had been shelved so long I had forgotten they existed. His public humiliation of me had actually been a public liberation. The pediatric surgery residency I matched into is at Yale New Haven Hospital, exactly where I had dreamed of working 20 years ago. The attending physicians include some of the same doctors who would have trained me if I hadn't left. Dr. Martinez, who taught my first class when I returned, will be my mentor. She told me that students who come back after life experience often make the best doctors, because they understand that medicine is about more than just science. It's about resilience, hope, and the ability to heal not just bodies, but spirits. Daniel and I are taking things slow, but our children have already started calling themselves siblings. His daughters asked if they could call me Dr. Ivy instead of just Ivy, which made me cry in the bathroom at work. We're looking at houses with enough bedrooms for all 5 kids, with a study where 2 doctors can work side by side, with a garden where we can grow tomatoes and memories in equal measure. The free clinic for children that I once dreamed about is becoming reality. Mr. Yamamoto's foundation came through with funding, impressed by my persistence and what he called my unshakable integrity. The clinic will open next year, providing free surgical services to families who can't afford care. Mark's betrayal had actually led to a connection that would help hundreds of children. The irony isn't lost on me. Sometimes Emma asks if I regret the years I lost. I tell her they weren't lost, just invested differently than planned. Those years gave me her Tyler and Lucas. They taught me strength I didn't know I possessed. They showed me that love isn't about sacrifice to the point of self-erasure, but about partnership where both people grow. The woman who stood in that dining room holding a serving dish 3 years ago had to exist for the woman in the surgical scrubs to emerge. Standing in my new home, the one I bought with my own money, earned from my own work, I sometimes think about that colonial house in Greenwich. Another family lives there now, creating their own memories in those rooms. I hope their story is happier than ours was, that the walls absorb laughter instead of lies, that the kitchen witnesses family dinners where everyone actually belongs at the table. My wedding ring sits in a safety deposit box with other documents from my previous life. Emma asked if I was keeping it for sentimental reasons. I told her I'm keeping it as a reminder not of Mark, but of the woman who thought she needed someone else to complete her. That woman deserved compassion, not contempt, but she also needed to evolve, and sometimes evolution requires a catalyst, even if that catalyst is betrayal. The last time the children saw Mark, Lucas asked him directly why he had called me the maid. Mark couldn't answer, just mumbled something about making a mistake. Lucas, with the wisdom children sometimes possess, told him that calling someone a maid isn't a mistake, it's a choice, and choices have consequences. Even Tyler smiled at that, and Emma actually high-fived her little brother when Mark wasn't looking. Next month, I start my 3rd year of residency. The hours are brutal, the work exhausting, but every surgery, every healed child, every grateful parent reminds me that this is what I was meant to do. The universe had tried to tell me 20 years ago, but I had to take a detour through someone else's dream before I could claim my own. Daniel proposed last week, not with a grand gesture, but with quiet certainty during a normal Tuesday dinner with all our kids. He said he didn't want to wait for someday when life was less complicated, because he had learned that complicated was just another word for full. The children voted yes before I could even answer, and Lucas immediately started planning experiments for the wedding reception. I said yes, of course. Not because I need someone to complete me, but because I want someone to compliment me. Daniel sees Dr. Ivy Harrison, not the ghost of Mrs. Mark Blake. He celebrates my victories without feeling diminished, supports my dreams without trying to edit them, and loves my children without trying to erase their father, complicated as that history might be. Our wedding will be small, just family and close friends in the backyard of our new home. Emma will be my maid of honor, Tyler and Lucas will walk me down the aisle, and Daniel's daughters will be flower girls. It won't be the society wedding I once had in that Connecticut church, with 200 guests I barely knew. It will be real, honest, and ours. Mark won't be invited, obviously, but I don't harbor anger about it anymore. He gave me the greatest gift through his betrayal. He set me free to become who I was always supposed to be. The woman serving dinner in silence would have lived that way forever, slowly disappearing, until even she forgot who she had been. But the woman he tried to humiliate, the woman he called the maid in her own home, that woman remembered she had once been accepted to Yale Medical School on her own merits, and she could be again. Sometimes when I'm in surgery repairing a tiny heart or removing a tumor from a child's brain, I think about that moment in my dining room. The champagne glass trembling in my hand, the dismissive words, the casual cruelty of erasing 15 years with a single sentence. That moment could have broken me. Instead, it broke me open, revealing strength I had buried under years of compromise and sacrifice. The children are thriving in ways that wouldn't have been possible in our old life. Emma interns at a law firm specializing in divorce and family law, inspired to help women like her mother. Tyler volunteers at the free clinic teaching younger kids about nutrition and health. Lucas won the state science fair with a project about cellular regeneration that his teachers say is graduate-level work. They're becoming remarkable people not in spite of what happened, but because of how we chose to respond to it. Standing here now in the life I built from the ashes of betrayal, I want to tell anyone who's been called a maid in their own home, literally or figuratively, that sometimes the worst moments are actually doorways. You just have to be brave enough to walk through them. The path might be longer than expected, harder than imagined, but it leads to a life that's authentically yours. That dinner party 3 years ago was supposed to secure our family's future. In a way, it did, just not the future Mark had planned. It secured my freedom, my children's understanding of their own worth, and a life built on truth instead of pretense. The investors may have left without signing a deal, but I gained something worth more than any merger could provide myself. Have you ever had someone try to erase you from your own life? How did you reclaim your story? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about resilience and redemption. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own strength today. Thank you for listening to my journey, And remember, sometimes the person who betrays you is actually setting you free. Until next time, this is Ivy reminding you that you're never too late to become who you were meant to be.